Welcome to Chowder and Grits, the podcast for Virginia Tech and ACC sports. I'm Justin Cochiola flying solo today. Got some comments put in by Tim, but we're just going to look at West Virginia today. The West Virginia Tech preview, a huge game for the Hokies, especially as this is the first time that they have hosted the Mountaineers in Blacksburg since 2004. So going to bring you a little bit of a preview. It's going to be kind of a short and sweet episode, but wanted to be sure that, we got something to you today. So actually, we're going to be en route at various times to Blacksburg, so we're looking forward to getting back. It'll be my first game back since 2019, and I believe that was against ODU. So not as exciting of a matchup, but this one's got my blood pumping. So, as I said, first matchup between the two schools in Blacksburg since 2004, third matchup since 2017, which was at FedEx, and of course the matchup in Morgantown last year that saw the Black Diamond Trophy end up in the Mountaineers' hands. So, growing up a Virginia Tech fan, there weren't many games that got my blood pumping like this one. Maybe Miami back in the day when Miami and Virginia Tech were fighting for Big East supremacy and, maybe at times, depending on where they were at in the season, a national championship, type of hopeful type of year. But West Virginia, man, it was just straight up just disdain for each other and for one another. And that's returned in favor by Mountaineer fans as well. So it really is the true sense of a rivalry. One that I'm excited to see back at Blacksburg. And it's going to be my first time at a Virginia Tech West Virginia game, so I'm amped about that. So let's look into it a little bit. Mountaineers are currently 1-2. They've got losses to Pitt and an overtime loss to Kansas to open the season. They did beat Towson, I don't know, like something like 65-7 or something. But FCS opponent, they've got a pretty good offense. And looking at that offense right now, they've got a new offensive coordinator in Graham Harrell. And if you're wondering where you've heard that name before, former Packer great, first off. Of course, he was the backup to Aaron Rodgers. But you probably remember him from Texas Tech. And he was a guy who threw for tons and tons of yards back for the Red Raiders. Off the top of my head, I don't remember which era specifically, but he was definitely in the, I want to say he was in the Mike Leach regime, maybe not, but either way, he's got this offense looking pretty good, despite the slow start record-wise. They've got JT Daniels, who's the new quarterback. He transferred him from Georgia, originally was at USC. Right now they rank 14th in yards per game. They're averaging almost 510 yards per game. They're 11th in points per game at 46, and they have a top 30 rushing and passing offense, averaging almost 300 yards through the air and over 200 on the ground. So they've got a lot going for them in a positive direction offensively. They're also converting 54% of their third downs. So it's really kind of an oil meets water type of matchup when you're looking at these two teams, especially when you look at what Virginia Tech's been doing defensively and where West Virginia is offensively. Looking at the Hokies defensively, they're currently third nationally on third downs, allowing 17% conversion rate. So that's pretty good. It will be by far their toughest test of the season, however. ODU, not necessarily a stalwart offensively. If you remember that game, not that I want you to move past that. But if we want to take a trip down memory lane, what happened for for Old Dominion there was the big turning point in that game was the snap on the field goal. They returned it for a touchdown. It really kind of flipped that game on its head. That was a 10-point swing. They only scored one offensive touchdown. Look at the BC game, one offensive touchdown. And then if you look at the Wofford game, also one offensive touchdown. That was the first touchdown that Wofford allowed or scored all season, but it was against primarily reserves there for the Hokies defense. So take it with a grain of salt. I think what you can say about those three matchups is they're not exactly the most challenging offensive opponents. You look at Boston College, you would think, oh, good offensive line, good rushing attack. They got a good quarterback. They got Zay Flowers, a receiver. Well, this year probably have one of the worst offensive lines in the country, if not the ACC. So some things are still working themselves out. I think, it's definitely promising what Virginia Tech has done, but, going up against West Virginia, we just went over the offensive numbers. The majority of that offensive line returns. Doug Nestor also on that offensive line. If you were paying attention to Twitter over the last couple of days, you saw that West Virginia used Nestor to showcase their uniform selection for the game. I wonder why they went with Nestor. I don't know. I can't think of any reason why they would have chosen him. But it's going to be a very good barometer for us fans about whether or not this defense is a contender, a pretender, or somewhere in between. And we should have a pretty good idea of that after Thursday night's game. Looking at offensive personnel here, I think one of the things to keep an eye on is Caleb Smith. So Caleb Smith left that Wofford game with an injury. It was in kind of the collarbone range. It's not broken, and it sounds pretty promising if you listen to Brent Pry in press conferences this week, that it sounds like he's probably leaning towards playing, which is good. The other thing of interest here, a little sway in messaging, something to watch. Still not overly optimistic comments, but around Malachi Thomas, we've been hearing week to week. Now he's a game time decision on Thursday night. And although Pry said, it's going to be a stretch for him to play, I think hearing game time decision gives you a little bit of hope there. And I think, we haven't seen Malachi Thomas this year. He showed flashes. He had some really nice performances last year as a true freshman. I think when you look at the Virginia Tech rushing offense right now, which we'll talk about in a second, it really needs some stability. And I think, pairing Thomas with Keyshawn King, the revamped Keyshawn King, I think, that tandem could be something to watch. Is it that thunder and lightning that we've been missing for probably almost a decade now when it comes to the running back position? King will be back. He didn't play against Wofford. That was for precautionary reasons. He was good to go. And just something else to point out, Cole Beck. Some people are wondering where he's been. He has shown up on special teams a couple times. I think he's played like one snap or something offensively, but he is now officially listed on the depth chart at kick returner. So I think if you look at what Pry said around Beck, it's that he had a lot of rust. He hadn't played football in a little bit, so they were trying to work him back in. But hey, if we can get the ball into Cole Beck's hands, that's going to be something to watch. The dude's got a lot of speed. So hopefully we can see him return a kick or two on Thursday. Jumping over to keys to the game. I think it's pretty cut and dry, kind of like it always is for Virginia Tech. Offensively, you're just hoping they don't make mistakes. You're hoping they protect the football. They run some kind of consistent program. So starting with protect the football, I think, obviously Grant Wells got off to a rough start week 1, 4 picks. But over the last 2 games, he's done a much better job, and it's something that he's going to have to do on Thursday night if Virginia Tech wants to beat West Virginia. If you look at the game last year, 2 very different teams, 2 very different offenses, so there's really not much to take last year. But if you look at how the game went, what happened? Tech got down to a 14-0 deficit almost immediately, and then from that point on, won the game 21 to 13 or something, and really played a dominant second half. But it was too little, too late. They almost they pulled the game out in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, but came up short. That can't happen this week. It can't happen this year. This offense doesn't have the firepower to get into a shootout. At least we'd assume they don't. We haven't seen them score more than 30 points this season, and that includes a matchup against a pretty bad Wofford team at the FCS level. And, I think if you look at that Wofford game, which we didn't hit on to start this, is it going to spark a lot of excitement with how Virginia Tech played in that game offensively? No, but if you look at how they called the game, I think what they were primarily focused on was getting guys into a rhythm as much as possible. I think they took maybe one or two shots down the field. They weren't necessarily focused on that. I think if they wanted that, it was there. What they were trying to do was get guys into a rhythm, familiar with the offense, going through their sets, and really trying to, build some kind of consistency. We saw the offensive line play pretty much the entire game. Leads you to the next point. They have to have a consistent rushing attack. Virginia Tech overall just has not rushed the ball very well. And, whether it's a big loss or a snap that resulted in a number of rushing yards lost, you can take all that out. They're still in the lower third overall as far as team rushing goes. Keyshawn King, he's only had 4 snaps since week 1. So we don't know, what we're going to get out of him consistently. We want to see a consistent performance out of somebody. You look at the Boston College game, he broke off a 65-yard touchdown run. He had 3 carries for -1 yards after that, and then he left with the injury. So, he's definitely got that breaker, that speed, that X factor that you're looking for. But really what this offense needs is a rushing game that can keep the offense on the field, that can open up the passing attack. And right now, defenses just don't have to worry about it, especially when King's not on the field. Maybe if you add in King and Malachi Thomas, it's a different story. That's kind of to be determined because we haven't seen it yet. But I think if you're a Hokies fan, they have to step it up from a rushing attack. The offensive line now has 3 games under their belt. So it's kind of time. And that is the matchup to watch in this game, is in the trenches. The Virginia Tech offensive line is going up against what should be a fairly solid defensive line for West Virginia. Now, they've had their challenges throughout the year. They pretty much got manhandled against Kansas, which, I don't know what to think of Kansas right now. They're 3-0. Are they the Kansas of old? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, they beat West Virginia in overtime, and they handled a pretty good defensive line. The X factor on that defensive line and really of their entire defense is Dante Stills. Likely going to be a first or second day pick in the NFL draft. But, like I said, they have shown vulnerability this year. Virginia Tech doesn't necessarily even have to dominate on the offensive line, but they can't get dominated. Because if they get dominated, you mix that in with a very capable West Virginia offense, it's going to make for a long night. And then my last and final key to the game is the defense, obviously. That's what this program is now. I think that's what Brent Pry is trying to build, is a dominant defense, and that's what they've been. Now, have they played offensive stalwarts? No, they haven't. But, I think what you're looking for from this defense is, one, not to overreact. If they give up a big play, if they allow a couple of big plays, a couple of touchdowns, maybe 2 touchdowns for the first time this season, I think that's okay. What we need out of the defense is consistency, slow this offense down, keep the offense on the field, and then hopefully Virginia Tech's offense can keep the Virginia Tech defense off the field. But if you take the Towson game out for West Virginia, their defense was giving up 400 yards per game to both Pitt and Kansas and allowed a combined 93 points. Statistically, if you look at West Virginia, where they rank in total defense right now, it's 41st. Now, how can you rank 41st when you played 2 games against Power 5 teams, allowed on average over 400 yards per game and 93 points, and then you had an FCS opponent in there somewhere? So right now it's just a glamour statistic. I don't think the West Virginia defense is really that good. They've had a couple of injuries in the back end. They've had some inconsistent linebacker play. They've got good pieces, don't get me wrong, but is it a unit that should, terrify Virginia Tech fans, that is just going to shut down this offense? No, I think the bigger fear is the Virginia Tech offense going to shut itself down, or is it going to be able to get out of this kind of early season rut that it's in. So I do fully expect Tech to play good team defense. They use a lot of different guys to create a lot of different looks. Um, we haven't seen them blitz a ton. They haven't needed to. They've been going up against kind of subpar offensive line. So I think that's something to watch is, how much are they blitzing throughout the game? How much pressure are they trying to put on JT Daniels? And I suspect that they'll come out very aggressively. But I think the key is, how does West Virginia handle that? And then how do you adapt the game plan based around however they're responding? So, kind of wrapping up some comments here. I did want to get some input from Tim. So Tim sent me some thoughts on the game. His prediction is 24-17 Mountaineers. So that's a pretty common Tim prediction, I think. I don't think you should be surprised to hear that, because it's not that he's being negative, but it's cautiously optimistic. I think his biggest concern is around that offensive and defensive line matchup. And it's Virginia Tech really right now is still in a prove it scenario. So I totally kind of get where he's coming from there. From my standpoint, if you look at the line, West Virginia opened as a 2.5 point favorite. It's down to 1.5. Over under is sitting at 50.5. So about what I'd expect for total points in this game. It feels right. I would say that probably leans in favor of Virginia Tech. If they can, if it's 50.5, that means you're holding West Virginia most likely, hopefully, to less than 30 points unless you get blown out. And this really is a toss-up game, and it's going to come down to two things. One, it's going to identify which unit is more elite. Is West Virginia's offense more elite? Or is Virginia Tech's defense more elite? It's to be determined, because we've seen the Mountaineer defense look really bad, and we've seen the Virginia Tech defense look really good. We've seen the Virginia Tech offense look really bad to mediocre at best. And then we've seen the West Virginia offense look and perform at an elite level. So, something's got to give in this game. And even if the Hokies defense really does play well, it doesn't mean they're going to win the game. It's going to come down to offensive consistency for the Hokies. They have to figure out how to move the ball more consistently, sustain drives, keep the defense off the field for long periods of time. And they're going to have to find a way to win. It doesn't have to be pretty, but they have to build off of that Wofford game. And what do I mean by that? It's Wofford. Well, what do we talk about going to that Wofford game? Who is going to emerge from this receiver position? And I think that's what we saw out of Christian Moss. He came from off the radar. He played a great game. What can he do against West Virginia? We saw Jaden Blue get in on the action, playing with a heavy heart after his father passed away. And, if he can bring that kind of, consistency to the offense, especially in the passing game, you should start to feel pretty good about some of the other names they have behind those guys, like Dwayne Lofton. And then obviously Caleb Smith playing this week is very important with the injury he's going through. So there's some reasons to be a little bit more optimistic offensively. It feels like some guys are starting to kind of get their feet wet a little bit and a little bit more comfortable in the offense. They're getting Keyshawn King back. We don't have to worry about him not playing. Nick Gallo, he's been kind of a security blanket on this offense. From a receiving standpoint, he's been targeted a lot. Has pretty sure hands. Is he gonna, break the top off the defense? No, but it's important to have those, those security blankets, those outlets that a quarterback can trust and go to. And then you add in a guy like Connor Blumrick, and the Hokies have some nice pieces there on offense. It's just about putting it all together. So the other thing I wanted to mention here, and I don't want to overlook this, West Virginia has just been unable to close out games this year. They had Pitt on the ropes, and they throw an interception that's returned for a touchdown. They take Kansas to overtime. They throw an interception that's returned for a touchdown. That's how they lost both of those games. And when the game has been on the line, when they've been close, they haven't gotten the play out of JT Daniels to win. and they've lost those games. And so I don't think you can lose sight of that. Is Neal Brown on the hot seat? Absolutely, yes. And I think if you're Neal Brown, you have to win this football game. And so there's going to be a little bit of desperation there on the sideline. Not to say he's going to get canned if they do lose this football game, but you start the season 1-3, losing to Pitt, Kansas, and a rebuilding Virginia Tech. That's going to be tough to sit with in your fan base. So don't lose sight of that. I feel like West Virginia's playing with a little bit more than just the rivalry here. I feel like the coaches may be coaching for their job, and they need to get consistent down the stretch. So it's important that this game is tight, and I think it will be tight down the stretch. It very well could come down to the last possession. And as far as my pick, I mean, there's no way I'm picking West Virginia in this game. First time in Lane Stadium since 2004. You got Brent Pry, new era in Hokies football. Took care of business in his first game at Lane Stadium against Boston College. That was a nice step forward. Beating a rival, no matter how good or bad they are or what their record is, at night on Thursday. That used to be Virginia Tech's night. That was their day. Nobody came into Blacksburg and beat Virginia Tech on Thursday night. Now, that was for a period of time. There's been a period of time where that happens quite a bit, actually. But new era, new focus. Virginia Tech gets the job done. They start riding the ship at home. They beat West Virginia. It's going to be a close game, though. I kind of feel like I just keep landing on 28-24 as the final. I'll probably go 27-24. I think there's probably going to be a couple of field goals mixed in there. But I think Virginia Tech's defense plays a good game. They control the game. Hopefully make a big play or two that puts this offense in a really good situation to win. Maybe we see a little bit of special teams get in on the action. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But one thing I do know is Lane Stadium is going to be on fire on Thursday night. It's going to be absolutely lit. I'm recording the game because I want to watch the entrance just on repeat. And it's one of those games where I don't want to find it on YouTube in like 5 years and think back to it and think, well, God, what an electric entrance, but man, they lost the game. We got to start changing that, and I think it starts changing with this matchup against West Virginia. That's what I've got. Thanks for listening. We'll be back to you next week with our regularly scheduled programming. And just one final thing, be sure to listen, subscribe, leave us a rating. Look for us at the game. We'll be there, walking around, probably in the RV lot, tailgating, having a good time, probably throwing back a few beers. But looking forward to the game, and we'll see you guys later.